Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Canadian Bowler Podcast. I am Michael Petulli, and I'm joined here today by my co-host, Daryl Fitzgerald, and we have two special guests here with us. So joining us from World Bowls, we have Neil Dalrymple, the CEO of World Bowls, and we have Ian Howard. He is the director of the Americas region for World Bowls as well. So thank you for joining us, both of you. We're excited to get into some conversation here about World Bowls and sort of all the new exciting things that are happening there. So when we do the interviews, typically let you guys sort of introduce yourself and how you relate to bowls. I'll give Neil the floor first, just because I think it's his first time here on the podcast. So go ahead, Neil.
Yep. Thanks, Michael and Daryl, and good to see Ian. Appreciate the opportunity to be on this podcast. So that's wonderful to have that chance to talk a bit about World Bowls today. I'm the CEO, as you said, CEO of World Bowls. I've been in the position since December the 1st last year. Prior to that, I was the CEO of Bowls Australia for 15 and a half years. Over that time, I've certainly come to very much enjoy the sport of bowls. I've started to play, and I wouldn't say I'm very good, but I hold my own on the green, and look, I enjoy the social elements and also the competitive side of the sport. So I think it just fits so well into society these days. So look forward to talking more about World Bowls and perhaps giving the listeners some insights about the current state, the future plans, and there's a lot to be excited about the future of bowls in the world.
So if you would like me to take over, Michael, and
Absolutely,
just say a few
Ian.
words. Okay, thanks, Daryl. Well, I'll just say what I said just prior to coming on, that this is really about Neil's experiences, especially as he's CEO of World Bowls. You know a little bit about my background, so I don't wish to go onto that too much, except that my joining World Bowls as a director has been very enlightening and I'm finding it very, very exciting, and especially exciting since we've made the changes. We decided to, we had to, and we were talking about it for some time. Where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? And all this kind of stuff. And then we sort of plunked on the idea of, we've got to bring in somebody like Neil and the caliber and the knowledge that he brings to the sport. And so far, the love affair with Neil is it's been raging. We're very excited about what he's doing and what he hopes to do. As far as the Americas is concerned, very quickly, we've got a lot of challenges. I've kept Neil as informed as I can. The challenges aren't daunting. We can solve them. But for example, last year we didn't have a US Open. We want to have a US Open this year. We're talking about America's Challenge, and we can talk about that more later on. So just very quickly, I'm excited to be back with you guys, and I thank you for that, and thank you for setting this up today.
So just to kick this off, I'm sure a lot of our listeners know about World Bowls mainly from the World Championship and their work with Commonwealth Games and some of the really large things like Champion of Champions. Neil, can you give us a brief overview of what else does World Bowls do for bowls?
Yeah, no, good question, Daryl. Look, it's a little event focused, and it has been for some time. And I certainly, when I was CEO of Bowls Australia, I was probably quite critical of World Bowls insofar as that all that World Bowls did was run events. It certainly is. It's certainly part of what World Bowls does, but there's a lot more to it, and certainly into the future, we need to become more relevant to all of our members, of which we've got 58 member countries, which is, in comparison to other sports around the world, that is quite small, and we'll probably touch on that as a focus area a bit later too, in terms of how we need to grow our membership. supporting the members is important, as a lot of our countries are very small and smaller than perhaps the average Canadian bowls club. So they require assistance with governance. They require assistance with getting the right structure in place to run their sport, and how they liaise and work with their peak sports federation. One area that I'd like to touch on is around Olympics and Paralympics, and I've been working on, particularly in the last couple of weeks, working on how world bowls can be recognised by the IOC, which is the International Olympic Committee, and so we've got some pretty positive feedback that there is a way to do that. And what that will mean, particularly for smaller countries, is potentially will open up opportunities by being an Olympic recognised sport. Equally important is the Paralympics. I think we all agree that bowls is a fantastic sport for people with a disability, and if we can create even a stronger pathway for those players through to the Paralympics, then that would be fantastic. We were in the Paralympics back in Atlanta in 1996, so up until that time we were actually a Paralympic sport. So one could argue that it might be easier, probably will be easier, to become a Paralympic sport as opposed to the Olympics. Being recognised is one thing, is important from a funding point of view and opening up opportunities in other multi-sport events across the world. Will we ever get into the Olympics? I reckon it's going to be hard. That would be my kind of opinion right now. It's going to be really difficult. Listening to what's going on around international sport, there's absolutely a focus on youth. There's a focus on extreme sports. There's a focus on esports. Sports that can bring in massive television rights deals, they are going to be looked at from the IOC's perspective, I suppose, as a far greater, more value to the whole Olympics movement. So events is one thing. I talked a bit about governance and how I think what I've been trying to do since I started is open up lines of communication and really listening to the regions through Ian, through to the member countries in terms of what support they need, and some of it, as I said before, because they're very small, it is quite basic support around coaching, umpiring, equipment. Equipment's a really important area. Bowls equipment. Some countries don't actually have the basics of bowls, mats, and jacks. So how we can actually get equipment into their hands is important. We recently supported a coaching and umpiring course in Namibia, in Africa. So I think that's an example of what we can do, is provide some funding to support the running of courses, upskilling people within their own regions. So one of the big goals for me is, how do I get more money into World Bowls that we can then invest back into the regions and then into the countries. Ideally, we would be investing quite into the regions so that we can set the regions up to be stronger right across the world. I can probably talk for a while, but I might pause a moment and Ian might want to add something, and then there'll probably be subsequent questions that will come out from what I've just started talking about.
Ian, do you have anything to add to what World Bowls does?
Did you say something to me, Daryl? I missed that. I'm sorry.
Sorry, Ian. I was just wondering, do you have anything to add to what World Bowls for bowls in the around the world?
Well, that's really a Neil question. But I just do want to say this, is that what we are trying to establish is, for example, the America's Challenge. We do want to get away from being strictly sponsoring an event, as Neil said, and but we have spoken about coaching, a coaching committee. That's a new initiative and a good initiative. Of course, we're involved in the rules. That's a standing committee. People involved in it. We had Dick Watkins I think, I don't know if Nick is still on that committee.
He's resigned recently, Ian. Yeah.
I wondered that. So we do rules, and we're going to do coaching, and I think that we're going to put money as best we can into developing such a thing as the America's Challenge. And we just did the Oceania event. So these are new things, and it's new thinking coming from the board in conjunction with Neil. We're invigorated by his openness and willingness to talk to us as on a sort of a peer basis, as opposed to he reports to us or we leave everything to him kind of basis. So what does World Bowls do? We're going to try and do more than we've been doing, put it that way.
Perfect. Perhaps to add to that, Michael and Daryl, particularly around events, one thing that's come out, and we've started to use technology to help run our competitions and events. And so what we're looking to do is provide that technology for our members and regions so that they can run their competitions in a more efficient way using a system which is obviously built for bowls and can actually run the whole competition in an online cloud environment whereby it's quite intuitive and easy to operate. So I think there's certainly, in my recent conversations and meetings with many countries, they're quite interested in using that as opposed to what perhaps they've done in the past, which might be pen and paper or slides up on a sheet. So it's trying to move the sport forward to make it a lot easier for our volunteers in particular.
So I feel like I'll sort of jump forward with some of our questions, because we did sort of go into a couple of the topics we wanted to cover here today. So we did talk about, I think Neil said 58 member nations for World Bowls. We had 57 in our sort of list here that we had, so 58. So it's obviously been developing, and there's some new nations that have come in there fairly recently. Additionally, Ian has been talking about the America's Challenge, which is essentially a new event that's going to be happening eventually sometime soon here, because in the last 5-6 years we've seen the North American Challenge in North America essentially disappear, and there's not really any sort of World Bowls sanctioned events in North America. So we'll sort of start out with the first part there. So 58 member nations. Do you see there being possibilities of further expansion of bowls across the world? Like, is there certain areas that are growing kind of exponentially, or what's sort of happening with bowls growth across the world?
Yeah, no, there's Michael, excuse me, there's been a lot of, I've received a lot of approaches from different countries around the world and regions too. So there's interest there, but in a lot of cases, it's really trying to work out how serious they are. Are they an expat that has moved to that particular country? And not to be funny about it, but I mean, sometimes I wonder whether it's a person who just wants to represent their country in an event. That's why they want to set up a new country. So I think that's what I and the board and the regions, we just need to be careful and do our due diligence around any country that says, or person that says they're representing a country that they want to set up. I met one of the key persons in Pakistan Bowls, and he runs an Indian restaurant in Glasgow. So this is what happens. There are expats, and in the World Championships coming up, there are a lot of countries being represented by people who live not in that country, or their country of birth, or their country where they're a citizen. So yeah, there's certainly you need to kind of cut through some of that and see what sits behind their inquiry about how serious are they to establish a bowls association or federation in that particular country, and what infrastructure. As Ian and I have talked about, all bowls is bowls, and they don't necessarily have to have a green as we know it, an outdoor green that's with fixed infrastructure, that they could be playing short mat bowls, they could be playing rolling a piece of carpet out in a hallway. I saw in Wales and witnessed, and Ian's familiar with the short mat game, but in Wales, in villages right across Wales, short mat bowls is huge, and it's It's the way people actually get into bowls by playing short mat, and it's in a village hall. So it's very easy to operate. You can roll it up, roll it out, play your game of bowls, roll it up, pack it away, go to the pub for a beer, and that's your game of bowls. So I think what we all need to get our heads around as a sport is that is bowls just as much as it is bowls at the World Championship or a Commonwealth Games. It's a different form of bowls, but it's still rolling a bowl down a green. And the sooner we get there, which we're moving quickly, and that's probably to answer the question. There are countries that are playing short mat bowls in Scandinavia, Norway, Belgium, Denmark, who are not members of World Bowls but play short mat bowls. Now, my question is, why aren't they members of World Bowls? Well, if we're all together with short mat bowls, World Bowls, we come together, those countries will be part of the family of World Bowls. So there's some easy kind of, when I say easy, it's not that easy, but it's there are some easy pickings of countries that play bowls now that are not members of World Bowls, and they should be. And I suppose Europe's an example where it's quite a strong sport in Europe and through the UK. Countries, as I mentioned, Scandinavia. There's a real interest at the moment in West Asia, which is around Iran and the Saudis, the Dubai, UAE. A lot of expats obviously expats being mainly English, Scottish, UK expats that live in those parts, and also a lot of Southeast Asian people living there too. So there's certainly an opportunity there. The sport's going quite well in Asia. It's quite strong in Asia, with actually one area of the world where the sport's actually growing in participation through Singapore, Hong Kong, Malaysia, Japan, Thailand, Philippines, they're operating quite well. And we'll probably see their continued growth and improvement at the World Championships in a couple of weeks. I mean, they're getting stronger and stronger, and they're becoming more competitive on the world stage. Oceania's a real mixture, with Australia and New Zealand being obviously the bigger countries, and then lots of small countries, a number of small islands, countries that are interested in joining, again, with expats some of them living in New Zealand, but from those particular islands. The Americas region, Ian and I have spent a fair bit of time.
I found this on the web for countries.
Sorry.
USA, Canada, and then there's certainly the potential. We certainly want to work hard on the US and try and grow the sport. I think we all agree in any international sporting market, the US is very important. And how can we get the sport more mainstream in the US? How do we get those events happening? But even more clubs, more bowlers. It's I think talking to Henselite, one of the bowls manufacturers, they're selling a lot of bowls in the US at the moment. They've got an active distributor. But the good thing is people are buying bowls. And interestingly, in the UK, I met with Taylor Bowls and also Drake's Pride. They said they've never been busier in selling bowls in the UK. There's coming out of COVID, they're getting regular inquiries about purchasing bowls. So something's going right around the world. There's the sport, there's activity happening in different markets. So yeah, I think it's exciting. But yeah, growing the number of countries is important, because if we want to be considered as an Olympic sport or a Paralympic sport, we need to get those numbers, I believe, beyond 100, ideally. I think getting to a number around about 75 in the first instance is my target. And then how do we keep growing the numbers? But it needs to be a sustainable growth, not just growth for the sake of it. And I think some sports, and I will mention the names of baseball, softball, when they certainly went down the path of Olympics, they travelled the world and just signed up every country, any country that looked like they were interested, they became a member of baseball and softball. That's one way of doing it, but I think we want sustainable growth, and we certainly want more countries playing, and we want the sport to be more visible and people understand. A lot of people in the US, and I'll talk a bit more about this World Bowls series and World Bowls Premier League soon, but a lot of people we've spoken to in different agencies and sports betting companies they don't have a clue what bowls is. They reckon they might have seen it once, but they've got no idea. So the sport's not that visible and strong on a global scale.
Wanted to quickly circle back to one thing you mentioned. We've talked about it before on the show, and it's short mat. We see it in the world, and we see it probably similar in Canada, where we've got kind of the bowls associations, and then we've got the short mat associations. Do you see a bridge of getting those two groups together and becoming sort of one happy family?
Well, absolutely, Daryl. That's what I'm working on. Not just with short mat, but with disability bowls, and there's also International Indoor Bowls Council as well. So in the UK, as an example, they're very fractured. So you have peak bodies for outdoor, indoor, short mat, disability, men, women. We got in Wales there are 6 different national peak bodies. So it's clear that if World Bowls can take the lead and unify those organisations, we need to speak with one voice on a global scale. We need to speak as if we're in charge of the sport, and that we are one. So I was fortunate to meet Daryl. I meet the chair of the World Short Mat Council while I was in England, and they're very keen to work together, to collaborate. I've got to be careful, we don't want it be seen as a takeover. I mean, we need people to come with us willingly, and they need to be treated respectfully, and we come together for the right reason. And so I think in some cases that'll take a little bit of time, but I think with short mat, it's a great entrance or entree to the sport of bowls, but it's its own sport. It's its own bowls in its own right. And the World Short Mat have their own World Championship, which they've got locked in for the next 6 years. Primarily the World Short Mat Council just run the World Championships. They don't do much else. There is a World Short Mat Bowls Tour, which is primarily in UK and Scandinavia. So they don't have much to do with that. But I think as a way of getting countries started in bowls, then short mat absolutely is one option. And short mat can exist, as I mentioned, in Wales. It can coexist with other formats of bowls. So, and because it's so easy to set up and cost effective, it's an obvious way for World Bowls to become part of short mat. So I'd like to see short mat and World Short Mat, World Bowls working hand in hand or as one in the future.
So I'll throw a question over to Ian here. So we sort of touched on it briefly about the Americas Challenge and sort of how the North American Challenge has sort of disappeared here. So the plans when we had sort of gotten some information is that the Americas Challenge would be coming potentially in 2024, 2025. Do you have any more information or updated information about what's sort of happening with that?
None whatsoever, Michael, but I will say it. You're absolutely right on the money. 2024 or 2025, we would like it to be 2024. We've got the buy-in. We have one hiccup. Argentina, if you followed the economy of that nation, it's very dire. So they've been a bit reluctant to move forward. We'd like them. We've got to find a way to bring them into the fold, and it may have to go to the Pakistani running a coffee shop or something in Scotland basis. A bowling friend of mine is actually from Argentina, and he plays out a very good bowler, and he could maybe represent Argentina. But that's joking aside. It's moving along. We just got the summer is on top of us right now. People are bowling, they're traveling for vacation time, and it's really hard to get people around the table. We've got support from Canada, the United States, Jamaica, and Brazil, and so I think that we'll put together something, and I think it will be 2024. It probably will be, we're talking about somewhere in California or Arizona, but we had our sight set on Florida, but it may not be possible. And it could be later in 2024 as opposed to our original target date of sometime in April. There's a lot of work to be done, as you can imagine. You've got to find the right club, and it's got to have the volunteers, and you've got to just go on and on and on and on. But I'm hoping that we'll come to a shortened version as opposed to having singles, pairs, trips, and fours. I don't think we need to have that. That many formats. I think we could probably do with less, and therefore keep the cost down and keep the club activity to somewhat a reasonable amount, as opposed to commandeering a club for a week or something like. As you know, what happens with the nationals here. Is that somewhat of a good answer, or?
Just to tie up kind of that kind of line of questioning, in North America and South America, I kind of categorize us as kind of the low and mid kind of tier countries where we're almost there, but not quite in some areas, and other ones are just developing. We've obviously got some major overly developed countries like Scotland and England that are powerhouses, Australia, New Zealand. What kind of influence do you think World Bowls can have to bring up the mid to low tier so we see growth and I guess even results internationally?
Yeah. Daryl, that's a good question. And I think you're right. Some of those bigger countries are more established. They've got staff. They've got, well-established competition structures, coaching programs, development programs. So they don't need as much assistance from World Bowls as those perhaps low to mid-tier countries. But just on that, they do pay a lot of money to World Bowls too. So it's kind of this balancing act. You've got to kind of keep them on side. They've got to, as I did with World Bowls when I was CEO of Bowls Australia. You look at how much we spend. We contribute financially to World Bowls. Often the view of that person like me, when I was in that role, was what do we get for our money? What is World Bowls doing? So I suppose balancing the return on investment, which people are going to look at. Of course, they're going to look at what they get for their money. So where some of our membership model is at the lower countries pay very little because they're very small in terms of numbers, and that's historically what the financial membership system was based on, was the number of bowlers. So therefore, if you had a very small number of bowlers, some countries pay World Bowls $100 Australian or £50. So if we increase the fees by 10%, it's $10, for a whole country. So therefore, they're probably in that model, they're getting good value for the money they get to enter in international competitions. We treat everyone equally. Well, that's my philosophy, as whether you're Australia or Samoa, you'll get the same service as from me, because that's the way it is. And actually, to be honest, I don't want to, being Australian, being from one of the bigger countries, I'm kind of distancing myself a little bit from Australia. I need to be independent, not biased, pardon the pun, but be very fair to everybody. So, but I think the way I see it at the moment is that the greatest opportunity for growth is in those low to mid-tier countries, because the very small ones are very volunteer-based. The larger ones, as I mentioned before, have got the structures, the staff. They're employing lots of people to work in bowls. And then it's the people, organisations, countries in the mid-tier that need our support and probably are on the precipice of something really good, with a bit of help, a bit of guidance, a bit of support, a bit of investment, a bit of funding. And that's where I think we can probably have the greatest traction, is to, if we can invest more. I know it's not all about money, because it's about advice, but if we've got more money internationally at World Bowls, and we can invest in programs and enable people on the ground, train people up in the regions to deliver better programs, better coaching, better umpiring, better game development programs, then then we will grow, and those low to mid-level countries will grow into the future. And I think just, advice on short mat, unifying the sport, our sport, at international level, and hopefully that will flow down to that national level where we don't have the fractured kind of governance model, and that we can obviously bring people together. And in some cases, we'd be saving a lot of money by having one organisation as opposed to 2, 3 or 4. So, but it's all about the thinking and making sure we're all heading in the one direction. So yeah, it's but I think it's a good point. The mid-tier countries are very important.
Just add one thing, if I may, before another question pops up. We have discussed the idea of having a buddy system, and now how that might work is, let's say Canada might align itself with, let's say Brazil, and the United States might align itself with Argentina. Somehow or other, there's a sort of a relationship that's close to each other as opposed to far away. So I don't know where we are with that program, but it's something we've talked about.
I think it's something, Ian, we'll talk about. We've got a council meeting where a lot of the countries come, but not all of the right people actually come to that meeting. In terms of, when I say right people, it's the people who are attending the World Championship. So we have a council meeting for World Bowls, and then representatives of each of as many countries as possible will come to that meeting, and that's where we do talk a bit about the buddy system and any other development or growth initiatives. But it's certainly an opportunity to get some ideas.
So Neil, in a lot of your answers, you have been sort of referencing meeting with different groups and sort of traveling around, getting to meet different, I guess, parties, whatever it might be, the people who are in part of the different countries. So it sounds like you've been traveling around the world, meeting different member nations. What's been your big takeaways from all your visits across all the places you've been going?
Yeah. I haven't been going that far. I don't want to come across as if I'm a world traveller, but I've had.
No, but we want him to come here shortly.
I think Canada, US is the next trip. Ian's good advocate for that, so I think it's. I've got to be very strategic about where I go, because we don't have a lot of money, and so it has to be a really good reason to go. And so I went to Malaysia in February early this year, and that was at the Asian Lawn Bowls Championship in a place called Ipoh, which is 3 hours north of Kuala Lumpur. And what it enabled me to do is meet all the Asian countries, or certainly most of them, and certainly many of the key players. So that was important. And more just the fact that I can meet them face to face and understand how the sport is traveling in that part of the world. And they certainly appreciated me being there. And I think, Asia is interesting. There was a view that there's too much focus, and you might have a similar view, that there's too much focus on the Northern Hemisphere, which you're part of, obviously, Northern and Southern. But I think when they talk about the Northern Hemisphere, they're really referring to the UK. And so there was a strong, they didn't actually come out and say it, but I could feel it. They said, well, we're a forgotten group of bowls organisations in Asia. So that was strategically important. I don't want Canada and the US to feel like that. So that's why this is a trip there is very important. The trip to the UK was, World Bowls has been based in the UK for many years, as Ian knows. So, meeting with a number of the countries was important. Going to meet with the Bowls England board, meeting with the CEOs of Bowls Scotland, Bowls England, meeting with all of the officials from Bowls Wales. As I said, I met some guy from Pakistan, and then on my way back, I went to Switzerland, which was kind of on my way home. As you can imagine, it's a long trip from England or Scotland back to Australia. So going to the Lausanne where the IOC is based, and meeting with a number of international sporting groups. I think the interesting thing there is that there is one building in Lausanne that has almost every international federation or people like WADA, which is the World Anti-Doping Authority, who's quite important for world bowls. So it was really fascinating to look. There's actually no one there. A lot of these international federations have offices, but they don't actually have anyone in them. But it's all probably for tax reasons, and it's about being in. It's a world sporting hub, Lusan, and so that probably hit home to me. The importance, and we need to be global bowls. We need to actually spread our wings and connect with these. There's so many people out there in world sport running events, running doping, running, all different activities, and we need to be connected with these people, and we need to be viewed on a kind of a platform that sees that, world bowls is part of this fraternity. So that was important. And I mentioned before, I met with some of the bowls manufacturers who we have 4 licensed bowls manufacturers in the world. So you guys would know Henselite, Taylor, Drake's, Pride, and also Aero. So we have 4, and each of those manufacturers pay World Bowls a license fee to be able to make bowls. So 2 of them are based in Australia, 2 of them are based in England and Scotland. So being able to meet them was important. An interesting meeting, I met a couple of the suppliers of carpet and synthetic carpet and also short mat bowls. So Dales Sports and a company called Green Gauge are both very active in building greens, so building synthetic surfaces or carpet around the world, and also providing or selling short mat bowls mats. So yeah, it was good to hear how their businesses are travelling, and they also pay World Bowls a license fee. So it was good to connect with them. And then I met with the people like you'd probably be familiar with the PBA, the World Bowls Tour that run the Potters, and so I met with them. They're hooked up, or the International Indoor Bowls Council are also they're a party to the World Bowls Tour. So that was good to meet with them, and we've been talking to them about how they could fit in with the this proposed World Bowls Tour or World Bowls series that we're looking to establish in 2024, which the Americas Challenge, the US Open, if we can get that up and going, 2 events that we would see being on this calendar for World Bowls and be sanctioned events by World Bowls, which would then accrue ranking points into an overall world ranking system that we're hoping to launch by the end of this year for 2024. We're building something from scratch, so it's going to take time, but we want to create more interest in the sport globally, and one way of doing that is to have a ranking system and a tour, basically, where players like us, Ian, myself, we might want to have a world ranking, play in some events where we actually get a world ranking. So, and I think that's, we've got some people helping us on this that have done something similar with tennis, the APT tour. You look at the golf tours, you look at tours now that are running in surfing, in beach volleyball, these tours run around the world. Table tennis is another one, and we see that would be important to grow the profile of the sport globally. So yeah, look, there was lots that came out of those meetings, and as I've touched on before, the Olympic recognition is one of them, which is the path there is around World Bowls becoming a member of the World Petanque and Bowls Federation. So if we become an affiliate of them, then bowls would then they're already IOC recognised, so that we would become IOC recognised by becoming a member of them. The alternative is we go alone and we try and seek IOC recognition as a standalone sport, which is absolutely possible. But at the moment, from all my advice and the information that I got, then our best bet right now is to go down that path, which would then, as I mentioned before, open up doors for all of smaller members who would then become Olympic recognised, and thus there could be funding available from their peak sports federations under that model. Even though we're not even though we're not in the Olympics, just being recognised is a major step forward.
Yeah, Daryl, you've spent time. I don't know about you, Michael, but Daryl, you've spent time in Australia, correct? And it's particularly at Broadbeach, and I just wondering how what your experience. I'm going to ask you the question. We turn. You're now being interrogated, not Neil and I. Is just how you have been receiving Neil's information, and how you might ask it the next question that might be really interesting for. Cause I'm finding some of this stuff that Neil is saying. I've read his report, and I'm starting to think I'm hearing it differently now that I've got the gentleman Neil in front of me and I'm listening to it. So can you give us something back from your observation that Neil can take away?
Well, I know both. For me, coaching, I did get to bowl a little bit down there, but I got to see all the background stuff, meet with a bunch of the coaches from other countries, which was fantastic. Mike got to actually play down there when he was on the national team.
Okay.
The big thing for me is just the growth of the sport internationally. I've seen some of the smaller countries come, play in an event, and then I never see those people again, which is sometimes a struggle. You're excited to see them come in, but you want to see them again, and you want to see them get better. So from a coaching perspective, for me, it's exciting to hear some of the plans to build some stuff and even connect with Shortmat, just to grow the sport, grow the recognition of the sport, and hopefully, for my benefit, grow the coaching and see those countries that are in some competitions and not. We will see them at World Bowls. There's a whole bunch of them there. We'll talk about that a little later, but that's really the exciting part for me. What about you, Mike?
So in other words, if I may put words in your mouth, we're somewhat on the right track.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, Michael.
Yeah, no, Daryl sort of threw me the question there. I would say the information about the talks or sort of the dialogue going on between Shortmat and World Bowls is a very good thing in my mind, or a very important thing. It's something I've brought up on the podcast multiple times, is that I see Shortmat being a big opportunity or an inroad that could be made for a lot of countries to give it a shot or potentially give it a go, because it's not exactly cheap to construct a traditional lawn bowls green and maintain it, everything associated with that. Getting yourself a carpet that you can roll out in a hall, a gymnasium, whatever it might be, that's a little more feasible for a lot of people. So it's good to see that sort of talking is happening, because I know that's something I've talked about with Daryl, and I think on the air a few times, is that it's very confusing in Canada. We have many Shortmat clubs, and we have a separate Canadian Shortmat Association, but then we don't have a Canadian and they have a Canadian Shortmat Championship, but then it's not recognized by Bowls Canada, and then it's just kind of a weird. They almost don't seem to coexist. So it's encouraging to hear that at least there's dialogue happening, and that hopefully maybe there's a merger or something down the line where we can kind of work together and sort of actually get along, because they are very, very similar sports.
One thing can I ask a question of Daryl? I'm not trying to take over here. I'm just trying to just go some ideas. The Olympics are coming to Australia, and we might be being the host nation. Australia might be able to get bowls, our familiar game of bowls, outdoor bowls, as a demonstration sport.
That's exciting.
Is that correct, Neil?
Look, it's not a demonstration sport anymore. No, it's so all the sports. Some sports will come in on the recommendation of the local organising committee. So in the case of Brisbane 2032, the committee will say, here are the core sports, which I've had this explained to me, so I'm a lot clearer about it now. There are 28 core sports. So really, then there are often there might be 1, 2, or 3 that are invited to come in to be one of those 28 because one of the 28 can't be demonstrated in that particular country. So ultimately the IOC has the final say on that. And if I'm a betting man, which I sometimes am, that cricket will be in the Olympics in 2028 in Los Angeles, T20 cricket, and will be in 2032. I could almost put a lot of money on that. I think that would be the case. Here's one for you. How many people listen to this podcast?
We're almost at 4,000 subscribers, and
following. I'll just be careful what I say. I reckon esports will be in the 2032 Olympics. Esports, that's E, not X, but esports will be in. So that'll be a medal sport. Some would argue, is it a sport? But it is these days. So yeah, it's a changing landscape. But look, I won't discount. Our optimism is that we might get. We'll be trying to get bowls in 2032. You know what though? But it mightn't be what we all think. It might be short mat, Ian. It might be. It could be something. It'll be certainly the format will have to be fast, engaging, exciting for spectators, for broadcasters, and I suppose I go back to cricket. The reason why cricket's going to get in because $350 million of broadcast fees will come into the IOC from India. And that's where the eyeballs will speak in terms of who gets in. And I think the other example is that I mentioned baseball and softball. I mean, they come in and out of Olympics depending on the host. And the US obviously hosting Los Angeles in 28. Baseball and softball are strong sports in the US. So, yep, they'll be in Los Angeles. They'll probably be in Brisbane as well, maybe. But, yeah, someone's really got to drop out. And as it was explained to me, modern pentathlon is an Olympic sport. And one could argue, well, how does modern pentathlon stay in the Olympics? Well, there's also connections, there's political connections here, and that's why. So there's a lot goes on in this world of sport, and not all of it makes sense, but there's a lot going on behind, whether it's money, whether it's political, and you've got to really advocate your sport strongly. And I think getting back to, if we get Olympic recognition, we can get into the Pan American Games. We can get into the World Games, which are in China in 2025. At the moment, we can't get into. We're not allowed to participate in those sports because we're not Olympic recognised. So there's a whole other range of events, multi-sport events that could get us in, which would then showcase the sport of bowls and then possibly position us better for Olympics and Paralympics.
I mean, it does sound exciting. I know when bowls was brought up as initially possibly going into the Olympics, or at least going down that path, a lot of people were excited to see where that would go. So, yeah. Being at some of the events and knowing firsthand all the stuff that goes into it, it's not surprising that it will take a while, but hopefully we will get there. That kind of leads me into another question, which is not so positive, I guess, but obviously the big talk of right now is the Commonwealth Games. I know for me, the initial fear was when I heard that bowls was no longer a core sport in the Commonwealth Games. I thought that was something interesting. But now with Victoria not hosting in 2026 and Alberta, Canada just recently pulling out their attempt for 2030, I guess the general question is, what is happening with one of the biggest events in the bowls calendar?
So, yeah, that was extremely disappointing, Victoria pulling out. I don't think anyone really saw that coming. Running a regional games was always going to be a challenge. So they were running I come from Melbourne in Victoria, so it's my home state. The government definitely ran here. The state government was the one that bidded for it. Their choice was to run a regional games, which obviously meant more investment in infrastructure because some of those regions didn't have the facilities to deliver the games. What would have been a better decision in hindsight would have been to run the games in Melbourne as they did in 2006, and it would have been way more cost effective. I think the damage that the fallout is still is occurring from that decision, and unfortunately Alberta I think that was certainly part of the fallout. We're fortunate that I suppose from a positive perspective, the World Bowls president, Darryl Clout, is based in Australia. He's also on the Commonwealth Games Australia board, so he has great insights into what's happening behind the scenes. I know that Australia or the Commonwealth Games Australia are looking and approaching other governments here in Australia to see whether they might take the games in 26. I know after meeting the Commonwealth Games Federation, unfortunately the decision came after I'd met them. They were really looking forward to 26 and 30, but I know talking to people in the UK, there's certainly interest from England and Scotland as a combined bid for 26. There's certainly been interest from other countries around the world too. I remain optimistic that they'll find someone. I know some people say to me, oh, that's the end of the Commonwealth Games. I don't think so. I think that we'll find the CGF, the Commonwealth Games Federation, which is the international body, they will find another host in 26. And I think you've got to remain positive and optimistic. Bowls, it's not a core sport anymore. Only athletics and swimming are. They've gone down the path a bit like the IOC now, looking at more flexibility for the host countries to choose the sports that are part of the program. I mean, fortunately for bowls, we're strong in the Commonwealth. Most Commonwealth countries we're pretty strong in. So again, bowls should be in Commonwealth Games into the future. But I suppose it's a bit of a time that for us at World Bowls is to now look at, well, if the Commonwealth Games wasn't there, well, what would our event calendar look like? And I mean, that certainly looks, we focus on our World Championships. And as I mentioned before, I mean, trying to get into some of those multi-sport games like the World Games, which is a pretty big event. As I said, it's in China in 2025, that we need to start to look at some of those. One of my tasks that I'm going to do is to put together some sort of a paper around the whole event structure going forward, which will come to the World Bowls board first, but it really map out what is our event structure, what is the quality, what qualifiers do we have for World Championships, what are those other events that potentially bowls might be part of. So it's just unfortunately, it's not good with the Commonwealth Games, but it certainly gives us a bit of a prompt to say, well, okay, what is our pathway? What events are we going to be part of into the future?
That's good to hear that there's at least sort of the background planning, or at least idea that there could be, I guess, muddy water ahead or something along those lines. So at least the thoughts are there. So if there was ever essentially like a pared down version of the Commonwealth Games where maybe they just go with those core sports, you sort of touched on that, you'd say World Bowls is looking at sort of what would an international calendar look like. Would it potentially be like an expansion of the current World Championships is sort of what you guys are envisioning, or is it more of like I guess running it maybe every 2 years type of a thing to essentially replace Commonwealth Games, or how would that sort of be looking?
Well, we're running the world champs every 2 years now. Again, I'm not 100% sure that that's the best model. One idea that I've had is, how do we make the regional events more meaningful, and how could they become qualifiers for a world championship? So that could be the America's Challenge, or we, as you guys would know, we used to have the Atlantic Rim and the Asia Pacific as qualifiers that would feed into the World Championship, and that's when the World Championship was run every 4 years. So I'm thinking that we need to work on how we make those regional events more meaningful. We run a regional event now in every region. So there's, as Ian mentioned, we've had the Oceania Challenge. America's Challenge, which will run next year. Hopefully, we run next year. We will run next year. Asian Lawn Bowls Championship, the African States, and the European Championship. So there's something happening all around the world. But right now, those events just get played for competition and for the winners and the medals, but there's nothing that it doesn't go on to anything. So, and perhaps it doesn't have to, but I think if you make them more meaningful, and that's certainly one step. And then, as I touched on before, this World Bowls series where we have events that are sanctioned by World Bowls. So I'd see those regional events accruing ranking points. So that would be something that, the players that attend those events would achieve. And given that they're playing country versus country, I think that makes sense. And again, having them as a World Bowls sanctioned event, and World Bowls supporting, making sure that there's streaming and good coverage of those events and good publicity and marketing and media around those events. That's where I think we can add some more value to the whole calendar.
So we've talked about it a little bit on the podcast, and you brought it up a little bit earlier. What can you tell us about the World Bowls Premier League?
We've gone out publicly for an expression of interest for a Premier League that would operate probably across two events. It's certainly, again, it would be very much a television broadcast event, a franchise model. We had 14 expressions of interest. Now that's kind of down to about 8 or 9. So we're now working on the whole, what does this look like in terms of a business model? I mean, how much is it going to cost to we've put in a broad kind of financial amount that it would cost to become a franchisee. And now we're in this stage where we're doing the business model on what that looks like. How much does it cost? How much prize money? Kind of all of the detail around that particular league. So the World Bowls Premier League, the concept is to have a franchise model, countries, owners from around the world. We can't be all just from Australia and New Zealand. We need it. It needs to be global. So if we can't achieve a global reach, then I don't think we'll do it. We'll certainly be doing the World Bowls series, which is the rankings and the sanctioning. But ideally, we would have this event where it's a global event that fits within the whole World Bowls series. So yeah, we're kind of we're at the stage where we're working through that, and within the next weeks, months, hopefully we can nail it or not.
So in your, answer there, you talked about sort of the ranking system that you guys intend to sort of use with World Bowls. Could you sort of elaborate what exactly that ranking system, how it's going to look or how it works?
So we're going to have, Michael, probably three levels, like Premier events, Gold, Silver, and then depending on their size, their prize money, a range of criteria, events will be slotted in at those levels, and then ranking points will be allocated again according to the number of the size of the event. There'll be X number of ranking points accrued or applied to those events and the disciplines. And so we'll apply obviously ranking points for disciplines on singles, pairs, triples, depending on what events they run. And then when the event is run, then the results will be fed into a system to then calculate the ranking points. And so what we would look to do is, over a calendar year, we want a good spread of events across the world. So it can't be centric to any particular region. We want enough events whereby we get a global rankings structure, and across the calendar year, you'll be able to follow who's number one, who's number 250, and each month it'll kind of gradually get to the end of the year, the season, let's call it, and potentially we'll have a season-ending event, possibly, or at least at the very end of the year, we'll be able to say, Michael is number one ranked bowler in the world. Darryl's number 2. So, and we want men's, women's rankings so that we can actually it's something good to talk about. It's publicity, not just for World Bowls, but obviously for the countries, for the member countries as well.
That seems really cool, actually. I'm really interested to see when that rolls out.
I can send you a bit of background information. I've got a document that I can email to you just to give you a bit of a feel for the spread. But the idea is, Daryl, that we want to be able to say we run the Americas Challenge and say a US Open, and if bowlers are travelling from the UK or Australia, I know some Australians coming to the US Open this year. And a number of Australians have come to the US Open before, that they come and play and they can earn some ranking points and maybe have a holiday at the same time.
That's awesome. When we're talking about sort of Comm Games and the Olympics, a lot of the newer sports, I'll say non-traditional sports that we've seen for decades and decades, like breakdancing, rock climbing, pickleball, esports, for instance, which is always a hotly debated topic. Do you see, and I should say, we see the success of a lot of events in the Bulls calendar, like the BPL, the UBC, which is going on right now, exciting TV, short formats. Do you see a role for the traditional game at the international level?
I think there's a place for both, and we got to, you could easily move a number of our international events to shorter version. We've seen, as you've just mentioned, the 2 sets of 5 ends and a 1 end tie break, and having power plays in each set, and it's exciting. Someone said to me once, years and years ago, they said, what bowls needs is more consequences more often. You need more. You need more moments in the game to make the spectators, the people watching on TV, better engaged with the sport. And I think that's the downside of our traditional game, is that it can kind of roll along, and it's the traditionalists like it, but there ain't those moments that happens in the shorter version. I think we're fortunate that our sport can be modified easily, as we've seen. As you've said, Daryl, BPL, UBC, a unique scoring system. I watched it last night, and I've played it, and it's okay. It's interesting. It gives a different perspective on the sport. I mean, it's a basketball score, not what we would know as a bowl score. It's you're seeing 75 to 58 and that sort of stuff. And I've played it. It's a bit slow from a participant point of view in terms of you've got to concentrate on the scoring. I mean, you tend to be scoring all the time, but when you've got a marker like with an iPad sitting there on the side and marking as you go with the points, then it flows pretty well. So we're lucky that we can modify our sport to be more appealing to a bigger audience and a wider audience than just our traditional bowls market. So World Championships, probably, for the time being, you'd probably keep the World Championships. I say probably keep the World Championships as they are, 21 up, 15 ends for fours and 18 ends for pairs and triples. And then for perhaps other events, Commonwealth Games, go to shorter version and make it more interesting. I've been to a number of Commonwealth Games, and I think what happens, we probably haven't sold our sport well, because people show up and watch bowls. And, before we didn't have red and blue bowls. We do have red and blue bowls now, which makes it a little bit easier. If you show up and you see a whole lot of bowls out on the green and there's no one telling you what's going on, like, how do you work out what's happening here? Like, you need good PR, good someone over the PA system to explain to you what's going on. At least with red and blue, you can start to work out, well, he's got red and he's got blue, so who's playing. So yeah, I think the changes on bowls has made it a bit easier, and we probably just need to start to the future of bowls. What does bowls look like in 10 or 15 years? Well, I would probably say it's the shorter version. If we want to remain relevant as a sport, then what are you going to be playing out in the park? Well, I reckon it's going to be a shorter version in a time frame that is a bit more friendly for everyone, shorter, sharper, and get in, get out, play a game of bowls, and get home to your family.
Well, one of the things we sort of touched on in your last, I guess, answer there was, so the World Bowls Championship is just around the corner. So it's going to be occurring, well, I guess it's this month, starting this month right away here. So what can we expect with that event occurring? You said it's more the traditional format, and it's sort of the 15 ends, everything like that. Is there any sort of new exciting things with World Bowls, or is it sort of the same format and everything that we've expected from the previous ones?
I think what this one, Michael, is it's the biggest world championship ever. So that's probably the main talking point. There are 44 countries. So we talk about the 58 countries affiliated with World Bowls. Well, most of them are coming to the World Championship. So it is, and one could argue, is this the right format? You know, is it having an open championship, is that the right format? So you've got, with all due respect to a lot of the bowlers that are coming, I mean, I might be better than some of them, you know. There's some division, low division, but they're representing their country, so I think that's exciting. What I've seen over the years at Commonwealth Games, and of course this is the first World Championship we've run in 7 years. The last World Championship was in Christchurch in 2016, which seems like an eternity ago. So I think what we've seen is that some of the smaller countries have definitely got more competitive. They've got stronger. You've seen 2018, I think Cook Islands won a bronze medal. I think Norfolk Island won a bronze medal. You know, who would have predicted that? I look at India in terms of their growth over the last decade, since they ran the 2010 Commonwealth Games in Delhi. Who would have predicted that the women's fours would have won the gold medal in Commonwealth Games last year and the men's fours would have been runners-up to Ireland? Like, that is just extraordinary. So, and they're coming from such a low base in terms of numbers of bowlers and their facilities are average, yet they can be competitive on the world stage. So I think it'll be interesting. The greens are going to be a lot quicker, which means it's probably better for the Australians and the New Zealanders. And, you know, in terms of preparing for 15-second greens versus, 10 or 12 that a lot of people will come off, that's going to be a challenge. But I think you find that it's going to be colourful, and as I say, with so many different countries being represented, it'll be a great cultural exchange, and I think that's, from a World Bowls point of view, it'll be good to see so many different people on the green participating and passionately representing their countries.
So for people like Mike and myself who are passionate about bowls and love watching it, love seeing everything about it, what can the fans expect as far as TV coverage, streaming, especially for those that are outside of the Oceania region?
Look, there'll be pretty good coverage. It's World Bowls. Just to be clear, World Bowls, and this was before my time and probably Ian's too, is World Bowls assigned the rights to Bowls Australia to run the event. So we don't have whilst it's our event, we don't have a lot of control over the organisation, because all of the rights around broadcast and commercial and the operation and the risk too, let me say, and financial risk is with Bowls Australia. And they obviously get the revenue from government to run it. So we don't have a lot to say other than that there will be a good coverage around streaming. And I know that, yes, there'll be some, particularly the Bowls Australia will be probably a bit more biased towards Australian matches, but they've also engaged another streaming company from a local company on the Gold Coast, and they will be streaming other matches. So I think what we'll see across the whole event is, I think lots of different countries will feature in the streaming. So that'll be via Facebook and YouTube. And then at the pointy end, it is broadcast, professionally broadcast across the both weekends of finals. And so, I think that'll be broadcast whilst it's geo-blocked in Australia because it's through a pay TV operator. I'm pretty sure that is still streamed globally through Facebook, through Bowls Australia's Facebook. So, and World Bowls will be sharing all of the streaming coverage as well through our our social media platforms as well. So I think all in all, it'll be pretty good. Yeah, it's again, it's good for the sport to have a strong coverage, and World Bowls will be providing updates on our Facebook and website across the whole competition as well.
I had one question that we kind of skipped over at the beginning, and you talking about social media and your website leads right into it. Obviously, World Bowls has had a rebrand with their logo and everything around it. The website has had a refresh, which is awesome to see. I know Mike and I have both talked about it, and it's a lot better than it was. It looks really good and has a lot of information, and seeing a lot more communication. How has this change helped World Bowls in reaching maybe the same people that maybe didn't know what was going on and new people as well?
Well, we're definitely growing our. Look, to be frank, I mean, we're a small organisation. Just to put a bit of clarity around it. I mean, I'm a full-time employee. Historically, we've really only had one full-time employee and some part-timers. And even previously, before I started, one of the directors managed our social media accounts. And so, yeah, it was very much voluntary based with a little bit of paid staff. So since I've come on board, we've employed a person 2 days a week to look after our marketing and communications, and another part-timer to help out with administration. So we've probably increased our paid staff a little bit, not much, but we're still very small. And so, but one of the first things that I felt needed to be done was a bit of a rebrand and a new kind of era for World Bowls, and having a new kind of more engaging brand I felt was important. So that's the path we went on, and just uplifting, given social media is obviously so important these days in terms of connecting with people, being able to tell more stories and provide more information using that mechanism was important. So we've grown our social media following significantly. In fact, we've probably doubled it, tripled it from where it was, given that it was a very low base. That wasn't that difficult, to be frank. So, but look, it's all about getting and communicating what we're doing. I think it's just, for me, it's about connecting. It's not about showing off. It's just saying, like, this is what's going on. People want information, communicating well with them via email, via social media, but connecting more than just with the administrators. I think making sure that the bowlers out there see what's going on too is important, because you guys, as you said right from the start, you didn't have much idea what World Bowls did. Hopefully you do now a little bit more. I mean, it's more telling the stories of what we are doing, so that, and it does get back a little bit to what countries invest. If people can see there's activity, there's the attempt to grow the sport, then I think everyone's a bit kind of willing to work together. So yeah, we've got to work as a collective going forward. So, but making sure countries are informed, bowlers are informed is all part of it.
Awesome. I don't have any other questions for the two gents here. Do you have any other ones you have, Daryl? No,
that was fantastic. Awesome information, stuff that we've been itching to ask for a while. So this has been great.
Okay, we appreciate you guys joining us.